one of the attorneys, she just looked at me and she said, well, you don't have to worry about those things because you're practically white anyway. They had an idea of this is how Black women are, and I was not like what they were expecting by the way I dressed, the way I spoke, and all of those things.
Your type of Black is more palatable.
You always know just the threat level by how you're treated. You're definitely being studied.
Oh, for sure.
They're sizing you up.
For sure.
I've reached a level of unbotheredness. Doing these dances, this corporate gymnastics thing that Black women often, feel like we have to do. It's a delicate dance for us at times. It does take an effect on you mentally. I was the only Black woman there working with like 4 other women. And I just felt like I was just mobbed every day. Just constantly feeling like you had to position yourself to just be primed to not like physically fight,
yes,
but you just had to be mentally ready for any and everything.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Coffee No Cream podcast. My name is Erin Braxton, your host. Here on Coffee No Cream, we are unapologetically dedicated to Black women, and we share what I like to call Coffee No Cream moments, those moments that happen to us Black women just because we are Black. Now, today we have a really, really fun guest because she is super duper tapped in, really dialed into what goes on with Black women in corporate America. Her name is Tracie Walker, and Tracie is on TikTok under the handle Thinking Out Loud. Now, Tracie has done a series where she is telling stories about all of the different things and the microaggressions and the different statements and the sideways comments and all of the things that have happened to her over the course of her career. She works in the legal profession. And I've been watching Tracie on TikTok, and when I saw her, I knew she was immediately going to be a great guest because she was going to have some really telling stories because she's thought about it. She's done the work. She really is tapped in and dialed into some of the things that we go through as Black women, a lot of the things that we go through as Black women in corporate America. And when I asked her, she agreed to come on. So I'm so excited to introduce you to her. Now, before we get into the episode, I just want to ask that you guys please like, please share, please subscribe to the podcast. My goal is to grow a community that really is speaking to Black women, helping them to navigate through all of the hardships and the things that we deal with on a daily basis in the workplace and in life. Being a Black woman isn't easy. So I want you guys to tell me what you like, what you don't like, share with me, leave comments, keep me up to date so I know the types of things that you guys want to hear from. And I know the types of things that you'd rather not hear. We also have a Facebook community that is private that we like to continue the conversations in. Now, everyone cannot come onto the internet and openly share their stories or the things that they're going through at work. It's hard. It's not easy. People are working. They don't want to lose their job. They're already under a microscope enough as it is. So in our Facebook community, that's what we do. We continue the conversation. So definitely hop over there. The link is below. And I think that's pretty much it. So without further ado, let's jump on into the episode. Welcome, Tracie. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the ask.
So everyone, I am so excited to have Tracie here because I've been watching Tracie on TikTok, and this woman knows the assignment, okay? She knows exactly what is going on. She talks about it on her TikTok channel, and I saw Tracie and I just wanted to have her on. So we're going to just jump right into it, and we're going to have Tracie tell us her Coffee No Cream moment. For those of you who do not know, Coffee No Cream moments are those moments that us Black women go through in business and in life just because we are Black women. So Tracie, I'm just going to give it to you. Tell us about one of your Coffee No Cream moments, because I know there have been many, but just one of, and I'm sure we might even get into more.
Yeah, well, I think I'll start out with my very, very first office job. Of course, I was the only Black woman in this space, and I'm working in the legal field. I'm working with 2 attorneys and 2 caseworkers. It was in family law. And there had been something that had happened at the office, and I'd made a comment, and one of the attorneys, she just looked at me and she said, well, you don't have to worry about those things because you're practically white anyway.
Okay. Okay. Wait. Okay. You're in the law office. You are an assistant paralegal.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot to get you to break all that down.
Oh,
My
that's
bad.
right. So in this role, I'm an assistant. So I was hired there actually, like they needed a law clerk. Well, they called it law clerk, but not an official law clerk. But I was more in an admin role where I'm coming in, filing, doing things for them, helping them get ready for court, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
This was a job before I became a paralegal.
Okay, just take us through the story. What exactly, like you said, this woman said you're practically, but how did we lead to that? How did we get to that? Like, what was the vibe in the office? How are you feeling being in that workspace? Tell us everything.
Well, I think the main thing was, and this is important when you are, at that time I was in my early 20s. And so all these women that I'm working with, they're like 50 and older, and
Right,
they're white, and they're all
right.
from small towns. This is a government job, and that's pretty typical to have, that generational gap there, especially in government work. And so I'm at the office, and I think from day one, there had already been, just critiques about my appearance and how I dressed and things like
Mm,
that. And I could tell by the way that they were treating me and speaking to me that they had an idea of this is how Black women are. And I was not like what they were expecting by the way I dressed, the way I spoke, and all of those things. And so, when there had been an incident that came up, it was on the news, it'd been a while back, but they were all talking about it. And I'd made a comment, and this attorney had then said, well, you're practically white anyway, more or less insinuating you don't really deal with racism because you don't fit that mold of like a typical stereotypical Black woman. That's what she was insinuating.
I
And
love the
so,
different, like you're different.
right, because they often, they will categorize us.
Absolutely.
There's just by the way we carry ourselves. And it was like when she said that, that's not the first time I've heard something like that or being spoken to by another white person in third person. Oh, I love when they wear their hats like this for church. Or there was one time at this same job, I was at a conference in Memphis, and it's predominantly Black there,
Yeah.
government, still working this government job. And there was a group of Black women there, and they clearly worked together, just having a good time. And we're all getting ready to gather like for orientation day. Like we checked into the hotel, we're getting ready for orientation. And I didn't think they were being loud, but they walked in together. They were giggling and laughing. And my coworker, who was a white woman, we sat down, and she sat down beside of me, and she said, I just hate when they're loud like that.
So she's already determined that your type of Black
Mm-hmm.
is more palatable
Mm-hmm.
for her.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's othering them. Like you
Mm-hmm.
just so she doesn't see you. This is crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, at that moment, you just kind of freeze when something like that's said. And I kind of looked at her and I said, what do you mean? I said, they're Black just like me. What do you mean by they?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was this backpedaling. Oh, well, you just have sometimes how women get together and they're just loud. And I'm like, no, I really don't know what you're talking about, which I did, but I
Mm-hmm.
wanted her to just come out and
You
verbalize
wanted her to
it.
say it.
Right. But I think it's
Right.
another example too of how often things like that are set off the cuff and without the expectation that we're going to come back and say, hey, what did you mean by that?
So you've been in very corporate, like I guess, environments,
Mhm.
being in the law firms and in the legal profession. So okay, let's go back to the woman who said, you don't understand, like that comment that she made about like you're not basically Black, or how did she say it again?
You're
Refresh.
practically white.
You're practically white. Okay.
Mhm.
So in that moment, this is your first job and you're young.
Mhm.
So what do you do in that moment? What did you say? What was your comeback in that particular situation?
Well, initially I'm sitting there and I'm looking at her and I was like, what do you mean? And because I'm seriously thinking, gosh, because I grew up in a PW space. I went
Yeah.
to a private school that was predominantly white. So, but, it was just, I didn't experience that level of microaggression. It was just when you're in the workplace, it's on a different level. And she was like, well, she said, you don't deal with those kind of things. Like just trying to assess me and think you're not the type of Black woman that's grown up in these certain spaces where you would be experiencing, outright racism or be accused of anything, of But it was like just going off on this tangent. She never really could articulate why she said it, which I think she wasn't expecting me to ask a question. It was just, oh, I can say this and walk off. And, I
Right.
remember going home because I was still living with my parents at the time and telling, them about it. And it's like, that's what my mom said. She said, they expect us to be a certain way. And she said, they don't really see you as a black person because you are close to what they perceive as their idea of whiteness, the way you speak, the way you dress. So it's kind of like not thinking, but I've gotten comments like that, different variations of it, just throughout my career. So
I definitely have as well.
mm-hmm.
I definitely have as well. It's similar to you. I grew up in a predominantly white environment,
Mm-hmm.
and I talk about this until my best friend came along when I was 10,
Mm-hmm.
which was like life changing.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only one in my class, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
There might be one that would come in and out, but it was really difficult. But, you learn how to adjust and move. And I think you really get an understanding of white people in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting because people who did not grow up in a primarily white environment, I feel our understanding is different. The things
Mm-hmm.
that we've been through is definitely more difficult. I don't think that the kids that I went to high school, because we started, I'm in St. Louis, so we started with a busing program. So all of the black kids that ended up in high school with me, or most of the black kids that ended up in high school with me, were bused in. And
Mm-hmm.
my family was one of the few families that actually lived out in the suburbs in these environments.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just think my experience was so traumatic,
Mm-hmm.
growing up, that people didn't really realize. Like I told my friend recently, because all this is coming up because of the podcast, and she's just like,
Right.
really,
Mm-hmm.
really, I
Mm-hmm.
never would have thought that had such strong feelings because you talk the way you do. This is from another black woman, but you
Mm-hmm.
talk the way you do. You get along with everybody, and I do.
Mm-hmm.
I have no problems, but yeah, it affects you,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're in these places and then you get so comfortable and you know how to be around them. You're pretty comfortable
Mm-hmm.
because let's face it, I think black people who have not grown up in primarily white environments are not always the most comfortable around
Mm-hmm.
Caucasians, but we've been around them forever. So you just kind of learn to kind of move in those environments. So it's a misperception
Yeah,
that
we have to learn how to do that too. So, like you were saying, and I've worked with other Black people who, have not grown up in those spaces, and you can tell when something happens. Like I pointed out something to a coworker, um, at a job, and she's a Black woman, and she said I didn't really notice that, and after I told her, she started to pay more attention to how this person moved in the department, how she spoke to her, and she was like, "Oh, I see it now." And those
mm-hmm.
are things that you're not looking out for. That I
Yeah.
feel like it's made us more hyper vigilant because I'm well aware of how to move around them. But yeah, there is this. I've definitely seen it. I'm like, you don't have to be over the top nice and try to gain approval and all of that. It's like because I've seen, how they operate. I can spot the manipulation. It's not as subtle to me
Mm-hmm.
as it would be somebody
Mm-hmm.
else because we
Mm-hmm.
know how this works. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I and again, I feel like I've said some things, probably on this podcast, that may have me in trouble with people I know,
Mhm.
who we're cool with, but I had something happen to me recently, with somebody that I know,
Mhm.
and I feel like they were surprised that I was working on a particular assignment that I'm working on
Mhm.
because of who it was with. It was like
Mhm.
shock. But this person seems to be an ally most of the time,
Mhm.
but so shocked, like real, like, we're kind of in the
Mhm.
same business, and
Mhm.
tried to do some things together.
Mhm.
But yeah, just like stuff like that. You're absolutely right. There are certain things that I think can be overlooked by those of us who have not grown up in those environments. So,
Mhm.
yeah, what you said is spot on. That's absolutely true. I never really thought about it like that, because I've always been the only one. And then I quit
Mhm.
working for people like in 2007.
You're like, I'm
So
done.
I'm done. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just like, yeah. And then I end up with the most, I'm not going to say they weren't ridiculous. They were as lovely as they knew how to be, these
Right.
people. I worked with them for many, many years, but again, just didn't get it. Said things sideways, left and right all the
Hmm.
time.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you peep it, but it's just like it was money.
Hmm.
So, yeah. So I want to go back to what you were talking about when you started working and some of these microaggressions, because it
Hmm.
comes up all the time.
Hmm.
When you were talking about the comments about your clothing, you were talking about, some of the things they would say because um, they were uncomfortable with you being the person you were in your skin, really is what it all boils down
Hmm.
to, because
Yeah.
that wasn't familiar to
Hmm.
them. How did that make you feel like, and how have you dealt with that, as you've, matured and gone on through your career?
Well, one thing I would attribute that to my parents because I feel like day one they instilled in me a healthy sense of self. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not to say that when I've stepped into these spaces and I've encountered, microaggressions, flat out racism, of course it's hurtful and it's kind of like,
Sure.
whoa, that was, rude. But I'm very quick to come back and go, they're just bothered by me. I triggered them in some way because I'm not what they're expecting.
Right.
Because, as we mentioned earlier, when you are too close to what they perceive as whiteness, it's like, oh, you're supposed to be inferior to me, but you're dressing nice, if not nicer. You have an education just like I do. And now you're in this space that typically somebody like you wouldn't be. So now I'm really, really shook.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, I feel like it's given me a better sense of just pushing forward and having that higher sense of confidence, not arrogance, but just knowing that when I step into these spaces, you always know just the threat level by how you're treated. And that was something, at the office, it's this whole thing of, we had this one job that I had worked at. We had what they call casual Fridays, and it was
Yeah.
a government job. And we had a new leadership had stepped in, and this person wanted Monday through Friday professional attire, and then on Fridays you could do business casual. So that meant the men could wear slacks, button downs. Ladies had to wear like a dress of some sort. You could wear denim, but it had to be like a dressy dark type denim. And so, of course, when he was hired, it was during the summertime. It's hot. We had a parking lot that was, not close to the building, so it was about a 10-minute walk. And I would just wear sundresses. So I would get sundresses and like maybe put a cardigan on with it or like a blazer. And so I would
Right.
have my shoes, to walk up because it was like you had to walk up a hill to get to the building.
Right.
And I would put those on and put some, dressy like sandals on for work. And so these ladies that I was working with, they would come in and just be wearing like faded jeans and um, t-shirts. Didn't have any writing on it, but it was not even business casual. It really wasn't. But because again, it's a government job, they kind of got away with it.
Yeah.
And one of them, I called her like the spokesperson for the group. Anytime something, happened or they were wondering about something I did, she would approach me. And so on this day, I'm at my desk and she comes over and she said, well, we were just wondering, like, why do you always wear dresses on Casual Friday? You can wear jeans. And she had on these faded jeans with a t-shirt, no writing on it. And she had on what
Hmm.
I call the summer camp flip flops, just the basic ones. Like she
Yeah. Yeah.
seriously had a pair of those on. And that's what I'm talking about. It's like you could tell she was just bothered. It's kind of like you
Yeah.
invite somebody somewhere and say, you can dress casual, but their casual might not be yours. And then you come in looking a little underdressed
Right.
and you start making these little barbs. And that was the kind of stuff that they did. And I could tell it bothered them. But the next Friday going forward, they're all wearing sundresses now
Oh,
and they're
wow.
trying to wear their little strappy sandals that look, a little bit nicer. Like it was just a
Really?
whole thing, which I just thought was so funny. And they just kept doing that. But yet they were going to criticize me, but then they started copying what I was doing after the
Hmm.
fact because I wasn't going to stop just because they had
Yeah.
a problem with it or they were curious about it. So,
I remember mine was my car.
mhm.
Um, and everybody pretty much knew what everybody was baking, but this was a gift from my father when
Mhm.
my mom died. He didn't know
Mhm.
what to do, so here's a car. right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a cute little convertible, but it was a conversation. I
Mm-hmm.
remember, it's just like, I remember the guy I was working with, he's like, and there's this agency where we had like over 500 people working there. So there's a lot of people in this
Mm-hmm.
place. And then we must have gone to lunch or we must have gone out or walked out together and he saw the car and he was just like, I knew that was your car. I knew that was your car. And it wasn't even anything. It was like a Volkswagen. You know what I mean? But he just, it's like,
Yeah.
what is a Volkswagen? You know, I don't know. It was always some weird stuff. There was comments about my wardrobe when I first started at the last place that I worked because I was coming off of working. I used to work for Neiman Marcus corporate. I lived in
Mm-hmm.
Dallas. I worked in the marketing department. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I was still young enough where, your parents still like, let's go shopping, mom. And my mom
Right.
had recently passed away. So I had clothes, I mean, I'm not into all that stuff now, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was definitely a conversation
Mm-hmm.
about what I was wearing. It was always a conversation about what I was wearing, what I drove,
Mm-hmm.
um, at all of my jobs, actually. Hmm.
I've
Yeah.
always thought that was interesting because with things that I've been talking about, there were so many comments about vehicle. Don't let people know you get a new car at work.
Yeah.
Don't talk about vacations. If you get engaged, things like that. But those are. It's just funny to me that that is something that really triggers some people in the workplace, but it does. And especially if it's us, it's you're not supposed to have something that nice.
And I am not good at that. Like this is why I don't work for people. Like I
Mm-hmm.
am not good at that.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm doing. This is what's going on with me. Like I'm not good at and I listen and I've seen so many of your videos, but I'm like that's their problem. But what you're saying though is absolutely correct because the way I've been treated, the way I've felt, things that have happened to me in these environments because of probably these types of things, I'm not paying any attention to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, well, we can't get her this way, so we'll get her that way, right?
Right.
So,
You're definitely being studied.
oh, for
They are
sure.
sizing you
Oh,
up.
for sure. For sure. And I look back at, people that I was close to at the time, one in
Mm-hmm.
particular, and I question that friendship. We're not friends anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
we had this come up before and I know I've heard you talk about it in some of your videos, but about being friendly with people at work.
Mm-hmm.
Um and how that's not something you are interested in doing. you I wish. And I'm just like, and my friends, everybody gets tired of me because it's just like, if I see anybody, you're just my friend. I'm interested in you.
Mm-hmm.
I will have a whole conversation with you. Yes, I want to know about all the things. Yes, I'm like totally that person.
Right.
But I was not as guarded as I probably should have been. Because when I left, I guess corporate, I was 32,
Mm-hmm.
so I was getting it, but
Mm-hmm.
I was I don't want to say I was bitter, but I was weathered a little bit in it for sure, and I
Mm-hmm.
had worked for like 11 years at that time. So it was but me keeping things close to the vest and not
Mm-hmm.
being my authentic self wasn't for me. That's why
Mm-hmm.
I know I have to work for people. I have to work for myself. I cannot work for people, but
Mm-hmm.
I find it interesting. Like I love that we're having these conversations
Mm-hmm.
because what I know is, my mother was a school principal. My dad he had an auto body shop in the hood. So
Mm-hmm.
they were not in office spaces, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even my mom being a school teacher, she was in a predominantly Black school in the inner
Mm-hmm.
city, dealing with predominantly Black administrators and parents and kids.
Mm-hmm.
My dad, same. So I'm the one to go into this office space, and I did not have the same preparation on how to navigate these spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I It just wasn't told to me. And then, really 2 years after I got out of college, my mom passed away. So we just didn't have those. She would have been the
Conversations.
closest. And my
Hmm.
dad, certainly not, because he's
Hmm.
just like going to work, doing his hustle. So
Right.
I feel like I didn't have the prep, you know,
Hmm.
I wasn't prepared.
Yeah, but I think even when you do, it's like it'll happen and you're kind of, wait a minute, did you just say that? And
Right.
you're taken aback a little bit. And it's just, but I think too, from going to a PW school, K through 12th grade,
Mm-hmm.
that was my parents early on were just like, these are the things you need to, this is how you carry yourself around them. Don't joke, don't do this, don't do that, because you're opening up that door for them to do or say whatever, because my dad would always say they're going to test you just to see how far they can push,
Mm.
what's okay and what's acceptable and what's not. And those things carried over into the workplace, but that still doesn't mean that I wasn't, there's definitely some things where I'm like, really, did you just say that to me? you know or just
Yeah.
even conversations around you. um and this may be a crazy comparison, but it just reminded me, if you've ever watched movies about, the antebellum South and slavery, there's always a scene where someone enslaved is walking around serving, everybody at the table, and they're just the things that are coming out of their mouth in the presence of this person
Yeah.
is just totally, racist, and it's awful, but they don't even think about that.
Right.
And a lot of times when you're the only black person in these spaces, especially in these like upper level, like the legal field, the medical field, because I've seen a lot of people who work in the medical field, make comments on social media about things that have been said to them or things that, doctors feel very comfortable saying to them. And again, it's just this sense of entitlement that, oh, I can make this comment, it's just her. Even if she says something or calls me out, you know, who's going to check me? Because
Yeah.
it's usually somebody who's in a high ranking position in that field. And, everybody else just kind of puts their head down or like, oh, I can't believe he said that. And then they'll try to brush off like, oh, well, he's old, and I'm like, yeah, but that's no excuse.
Right.
So.
So how do you handle this stuff now that you're seasoned in it? You've been working, you've got the experience. When this stuff happens today, like how do you deal with it?
For me, I've reached a level of unbotheredness in the sense that, like a lot of times I know I did a video a few weeks ago about this attorney. I was leaving the office to go get some coffee, and she was with a group of law clerks. They were coming back from court. And she just stopped me and was like, where do you think you're going? And, most
Mm,
people would try to explain themselves or say something or like clap back like I'm none of your business or whatever. And I just kind of looked at her like this and I went, and I turned around and I crossed the street. I didn't even
mm,
say anything to her, acknowledge, because I've learned, sometimes you do have to say something and there's a way that you can say it that will make them kind of step back.
right.
But a lot of times if I'm quiet or I just kind of look at them a certain way and walk off, I mean, there's seriously been instances where somebody's made a comment about, oh, well, you're all dressed up today. What's the occasion? I won't say anything. I'll just keep walking. Or I might say something like, I just like to look nice. I take pride in my appearance.
Right.
You can say it like that instead of just going completely off the rails because, we can't do that. I mean, we can, but it causes more problems. But that is pretty much how I've handled things. Also, I will go and say something to the manager, even if I know that they're not going to address it. They might just brush it off because I've had things come up in previous jobs where I'll
Right.
go to that person first and I'm like, what you said was offensive, or do you realize how this came across? And
Mm-hmm.
then you get this vain, ignorance, like, oh, I
Of
didn't mean it
course.
that way. But it sticks because they act differently around you. They might change their tactics because you've called them out. They don't like that, but it's definitely made them rethink how they approach you. So.
How does it play out? Like, have you noticed a difference? Because I'm interested, like, when you just look at them and don't say anything and keep going, because that's so not my personality to do that. But I love that. And I just don't encounter this kind of stuff so much anymore because, I'm just not in an office. But do you find that that angers them? Do you find that that works and just kind of shuts it down when you choose that approach?
Oh yeah, it does. It angers them very much. It depends on who it is, because if it's somebody that's very much like this one attorney that I had worked with, and I've done a couple of videos about her in particular, she was very much, you have to figure out what that person is. She was a control freak. And
Mm-hmm.
she didn't like that I wasn't one of those paralegals that was just, oh my gosh, you're an attorney. How can I be of service to you? And,
Right.
of course, we're there to help them, but we're not there to kiss their feet.
Right.
And that's what she was expecting. And so, and even the office admin, we'd had a situation where I had to go to her and she said, this is the problem. You're not catering to her the way that she thought that you would or that other people did. And so with her, it is having that attitude of indifference and just being unbothered because she wants you to get upset. She wants you to argue with her and get a rise out of her. And so when I respond that way, I'm just kind of indifferent, like, oh, I don't know. Or she might say something snarky like, well, this is how I wanted this done. Or I'm like, okay, could you send that in an email? Put that in writing, please. And I'm still calm. She's kind of standing there like a child who just threw a tantrum and just looking,
Right.
crazy. It's just, there was one particular thing that she had done. She had copied the shareholder on an email she sent me about something when it could have been a very simple, hey, when you're doing these type of pleadings, would you please use this template? That's all she had to do. But she sends this email. This was like my first week at this job as a paralegal. And it was just this 2-paragraph email. Please do this and please make sure that you do this. And also you need to do this. And, you didn't do this the last time. Like just
How
airing
old
out
was
all
this
this.
woman?
She was an associate attorney that I was working with when I worked at a private law firm.
Uh-huh.
And it was just this whole thing. And she had the shareholder copied. And I thought, she's really trying to put out here, see, look, she's not doing things that I like. Like it was very much just kind of this whiny, bratty, like, you know. And after she sent the email, she steps out of her office because the way the office was set up, my desk was right outside her office. So, like she literally could walk out and take a few steps and she's right there.
Right.
And she said, oh, did you get that email? Like that. And I said, oh, I did. I said, thank you. And she said, I just thought it'd be easier to send you an email. And I just wanted to make sure. And she was referring to the shareholder, said, I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure he was aware, that I was just letting you know how we do things around here. But really, she wasn't. She was complaining and being passive aggressive. And
Sure.
I said, that's great. And I said, I appreciate you also attaching a template for me to look at to use going forward. And she just looked at, I mean, the look on her face was just like,
Mm-hmm.
and after I said that, I turned back to my computer, kept typing, going back to what I was doing. And she stood there for a few minutes and I could just feel her staring at me. And then she just turned back around and went in her office. And then later on that day, she went out to get lunch and asked me if I wanted anything. And I said, no, thank you. And she comes back anyway and brought me some like iced coffee. I said, no, thank you. I'm good. And she still just kind of, so it's, it's things like that. And, then there are
Mm-hmm.
some people you can act that way too, or you can say something kind of witty or snarky yourself, but it doesn't really sound that rude.
Right. Right.
And they will immediately just back off. But you get, I'm not going to say anything to her because she got all, but they won't do it. So I feel like that's been effective. There are times when you do just have to kind of go postal on people. But
I like that though. What did you call it? Something of unbotheredness. How did you state that?
it's a level of
I
unbotheredness.
like that. Yeah. I like that.
And not that you're excusing the behavior, but it's just like I'm not going to let. There was an episode on the show Insecure. I don't know if you've seen that, watched the
Oh
series,
yeah.
but the one where Molly's working at the law firm, and she finds out that one of the associates, who's a white guy, is making more money than her, and she's out having drinks with her friend, and he says, "Stop letting these white people stress you out."
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that my parents would always tell me. I'd come home and I'd say, "Oh, this happened," or I'm calling them and telling them because it's all about just trying to get us riled up and act out of
Oh yeah.
character.
Mm-hmm. But I like that because I was always bothered, unfortunately. I just didn't. I mean, I got to the point where I was just like, but I like your responses. I like that. I mean, and and we're trying to help women here. We're trying to help Black women here. So I love this because, creating tools or giving women tools and tactics that they can use, Black women, these tools and tactics that they can use when this kind of stuff happens. Because when they are these little microaggressions, like her CCing a shareholder for
Mhm.
what? Like, come on, dude. Like, everybody's email is already flooded enough. Do you really need
Right.
to CC somebody at that level to give instruction?
Hmm.
And the way you just handled her was was like chef's kiss, because not only did you thank her, you just thanked her for everything that she did. So she was trying to get under your skin and you just
Mhm.
didn't allow it. And I think that's a tool. That's like a strategy. To
Mhm.
me, I like to make games out of things, right? So that's like a game, right? So
Yeah.
it's just like, oh, okay, you're this type of person.
Mhm.
I'm gonna make let me just play this game with you. How many times can I,
Mhm.
do this to Becky or whatever, and make it a game, right? That's just how I deal with it. Some people's nerves and emotions and ego cannot handle that. That's
Mhm.
not, but I find, especially with what we've talked about in the past on this particular podcast about the emotional and stress and the tolls that all of this takes on us mentally and
Mhm.
emotionally,
Mhm.
that we've got to find a way to deal with it, because unless you're gonna I think, especially with the the toll that dealing with this in the workplace takes on us
Mhm.
emotionally,
Mhm.
it's so important to figure out these strategies and tactics and techniques
Mhm.
on how we deal with this kind of stuff and not let our ego get in the way. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So we have to learn. So I love, like, you know, and obviously you have to gauge every situation. If
Mhm.
you're somebody, your direct report that you're walking, you're reporting into, asks you something stupid, you can't just not respond, right?
Right.
So if it's somebody in the office that's just talking to you or trying to get in your business, you can, right? But be prepared, because perhaps they're going to go to HR on you, or perhaps they're going to
Right.
start a little rumor that, Tracy is hard to deal with, or
Mhm.
whatever it is. But giving women these tools and tactics so that we can navigate these situations better. I mean, maybe it's a temporary one, maybe it's your end game, right? But we
Yeah.
are in them. We have to learn to get along. We don't always have the option to mess up our bag. We're not in the position
Right.
to mess up our bag, so we're stuck until
Mhm.
we're gone. Or if and that's why I always say you got to get a plan. What's
Yeah, I
your
think that's key.
mhm.
Yeah, you have to, I would say, to just learn how to be witty, like sarcastic witty. And you can do that with certain people, like you said, depending upon who it is. And see, with her, I knew she was expecting to step out of the office and me to be like, you didn't have to copy the boss on that.
Right.
And no, I'm not doing it. And I knew that's what she wanted. And she just kind of stood there like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And which is a game. Like, and it's kind of funny. It's just like, okay, this one is like this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where I'm gonna handle that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't lose it. So you don't find yourself in a situation where there's really no recourse. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's something that you just developed over the years. I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that didn't come immediately.
Oh no, no, because it's very much a thing where I definitely want to. There's been a lot of times where you really want to just clap back at people and be like, "That
Hmm.
was rude. Don't talk to me like that." And you learn. I saw a post from another content creator. She does talks about this very thing, and just about being a black woman in the workplace too. And she had said something, and it was something like, when you are the only one, I know I can't win. So I don't fight battles I know I can't win, but I try to still be professional and stand up for myself. And she was just talking about how, when she's the only black woman in this space and somebody says something, she knows she can't, clap back in a way that would be like, don't talk to me like that. You have to say things a certain way. You
Right.
can say that was rude, or do you realize that's a microaggression? And they might go off and have a little powwow and laugh about it, but you got under their skin because they're talking
Right.
about it,
Right.
and they're
Or
getting
try to
and they're
cry on you.
right, and they're getting defensive, and the tears are always a big thing. But yeah, and that's something that I learned early on in my career, and it's like I'm stressing myself out, as you mentioned earlier, doing these dances, this corporate gymnastics thing that black women often, feel like we have to do. It's a delicate dance for us at times. It does take an effect on you mentally,
Sure
and it's
does.
like, I'm stressed out. I've have the Sunday scaries because I'm just like, what
Yep.
are they going to do today? You see that person's name pop up on an email or, one of the chatting apps that you use at work, and you're just like, you
Yeah.
know, And so I had to learn that over the years, but when my dad would tell me, you can't let these folks get under your skin because that's what they're trying to do, so they can say, well, she got upset, and sometimes, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I feel
Oh,
like
yeah.
that's just pretty much the mantra for a lot of us in the workplace. But for the most part, that was something I learned how to be calm, but I still wanted to be able to stand up for myself and let that person know, hey, I didn't appreciate what you said, or I don't like the way you're treating me. But yeah.
One thing my dad did say to me, because I was struggling so much in the last position that I did have and trying to get there, and I talk about my story and all the stupid stuff I did because I was so unhappy
Mm-hmm.
trying to get out of that situation. But this is why I stress having a plan. He said, it could make me mad if I knew what I was going to do. Like if I knew what my plan was and I had a plan, they couldn't make me mad,
Right. Yeah.
or and I was just like, he was talking about, well, he said we were talking about specifically someone that I worked with, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, you're right. So that's why it's so important to know where you're going, where you're trying to get to, like have a plan, figure
Mm-hmm.
it out, get yourself in the position where this isn't, your last resort. You don't have any other options, because that makes it a little less um, difficult to
Mm-hmm.
sit in those situations. If you know that you're working on something on the side,
Mm-hmm.
or you're working on a new course certification, you're educating yourself, whatever your business, whatever it is, you know the end game. So it's just a matter of time. This is just a means to an end.
No, you just have to be able to just stay calm and know, okay, this is temporary. And, that's part of it too. A lot of times when we're dealing with these folks in the workplace, they're already just miserable, period. That's base level part of it, because for most people, it's like they come to these jobs and they just don't think about upward mobility, But I always tell people, be strategic about your career trajectory, no matter what you're planning on doing. Even if you're at your dream job and you love it there and things are great, still keep the resume updated, still interview, like keep your feelers out there, network, join a nonprofit, do things where you can make connections and people know
Yeah.
who you are. So, like you said, that way, if something comes up, you're already prepared. You've got a network of folks that you can reach out to if need be. I know a lot of women now are doing side hustles. They're using digital, media to make extra, just because, especially with the way the economy is, a lot of Black women, we're getting pushed out of the workforce. So, it's.
And the digital space is kind of like leveling the playing field a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because, this is just something you could just come out here and do. All
Mm-hmm.
you need is a phone,
Mm-hmm.
really, to do any of it, right? And you're not waiting on somebody to um, give you a chance. You're giving yourself a chance,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
Exactly.
and one of the things I say is, because this is not something, I think I would have been better at this, because obviously I was doing all my retirement and my things like that, but I started a
Mm-hmm.
business before I left that last job. But I can't stress enough how having money in the bank gives you a level of confidence
Mm-hmm.
that is unmatched.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, it's all cool to travel and buy bags and
Mm-hmm.
shoes and all these things,
Right.
because you're making it now, but put something aside.
Mm-hmm.
I am not, I have not always been the best at that, and it
Mm-hmm.
bit me in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, when they're talking to you crazy, or if something pops off and you
Mm-hmm.
gotta go,
Mm-hmm.
if you've got money in the bank, it's just it's not, I'm not going to say it's not going to hurt, it's not going to sting, you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be pissed, you
Right.
know. So if you have money, it completely changes how you will even allow yourself to be treated,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, and they always act like they don't have any money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you show up and you have some, if you had some red bottoms, or if you had, some, YSL bag or whatever crap it is you bought, whatever you went out and bought, they're going to be like,
Right.
oh my God, or you have a nice car.
Mhm.
That's not the way they're living at
No,
all. They
no.
are like looking like paupers, and they've got millions of dollars in the bank. Don't
Right.
let it be twisted, right? I told my
Exactly.
neighbor that, who
Yeah.
people comment on what you're driving and all that
Hmm.
stuff and all of that. No, you need to make sure, like, and yes, we want the nice things. That's why we work and all of
Hmm.
that. But put something back so these people, when they get ready to get rid of you because they can,
Hmm.
you won't even allow yourself to be treated badly if you have money in the bank.
Yeah, and I think that is such a good good point. It's, having that foundation, and that's something again that's not really taught much in our community, is that financial literacy is making sure, like you said, there's nothing wrong with having those nice things, but a lot of times we come into money and we wear our wealth. And
Right.
there's nothing wrong with wanting those nice things, but get that foundation down first. Make sure you've got an emergency fund. Make sure things are, bills are prioritized and all that, because stuff happens, and that way, like you said, if a situation is so dire, and I had that happen to a friend, but, she's married. So there was another income, and she had a
Yeah.
supportive spouse. So, there was somebody there to be like, and of course he was just, if you want to go ahead and quit, go ahead, we'll be fine. We'll figure something out. So she was in a position to do that. But even if you're not, with someone and you have a second income, you always need to be prepared and have yourself positioned to where you can just leave at any time. And I think that's a big factor in why people, tolerate, or they'll stay in a place for too long,
Yeah.
because they just don't think they can leave. It's like, and just that fear of starting over too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's like with any relationship. That's like with
Hmm.
relationships. A
Hmm.
job is a relationship with that job.
Hmm.
And, we don't want to do it. Or for me, a lot of it was an ego.
Hmm.
I talked about this in one of my episodes, me trying to prove
Hmm.
what to who?
Hmm.
Like, I don't even like these people. They don't like me.
Yeah.
Why why am I trying so hard to prove what?
Hmm.
So again, like, let that ego stuff go out the window, like out,
Hmm.
because like, for me it was chest pains. I know for certain people it's migraines,
Hmm.
it's headaches, it's different things like that. And there is just no need for any of it. I promise
Hmm.
you. So I don't know if you've experienced any of that, but that's been a thing that I realized. It took me years to realize
Hmm.
that my chest pains were stress. I mean, I've been getting them since I was 20, 21, something
For me,
like
it
that.
was sleep, especially, when I was at this government job working as a paralegal. And I mean, it was, gosh, I was the only black woman there working with like four other women. And I just felt like I was just mobbed every day. It was just kind of this, and, the lack of sleep, and just constantly feeling like you had to position yourself to just be primed to, not like physically fight, but you
Yes.
just had to be mentally ready for any and everything. And, they had the boss's ear. They could say anything, do whatever, act any kind of way. And I mean, nothing was going to be done. So yeah, I definitely felt that way, and just being tired, and not. That's when I learned out what burnout is. You're just exhausted. You come in and you're just feeling like,
Yeah.
I just feel physically drained right now.
Right.
And I realize I'm like, I'm just burnt out. I'm over it, because
Yeah.
this place has just taken me down. And I would come home and just plop down and just be glued to like a reality TV show. And I realized that's why, just something numbing where I could just kind of stare off into space at the TV screen.
Check out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. No, I know that to be true. I
Hmm.
know that to be true. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. The physical toll, it's chronic too.
Yeah.
For us, because like you said, you have to be armed, you have to be ready. You're
Hmm.
constantly on edge.
Hmm.
You're never going to be as good as in
Hmm.
these people's eyes,
Hmm.
but yet, it took me a while to realize that. It's just like I'm never, and even when I left working, I was still trying to prove,
Hmm.
because I walked away from that place holding on to that stuff, right?
Right.
So,
And
you
I
just,
think if you're someone who takes pride in what you do,
mm-hmm,
and for that reason, it's like, and it's not that you expected a pat on the back, but just knowing that you're appreciated. It's,
right.
but we're intentionally overlooked, you know. And that was something my mom would tell me, there was something, I was doing at work, and I told mom when I left this job the way that they acted. A lot of times they throw a little party for somebody, take them out to lunch, get them a card or whatever. And one of the attorneys I worked with, she did, like, she was wonderful. And
Mm-hmm.
she, took me out to lunch with one of the other admins. It was kind of like three of us together. And she got me a card and everything. And I was telling mom about it, and she said, you need a bunch of white people to tell you that you're good enough. And when she put it in that perspective, I was like, oh, I said, no, ma'am, I don't. She goes, well, all right,
Yeah.
then you left, you found another job. Don't worry about this, because we're never going to get that validation. It's intentional. They refuse to acknowledge, and that's not to say that, I've definitely had jobs where I have been appreciated and, acknowledged, but it's just, they will act like they don't see you just because.
Yeah, I think it's strategic. When I was working with the last client that I had, this guy specifically came in to like nitpick and
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what he was talking about, like
Mm-hmm.
what he was talking about,
Mm-hmm.
but he just tried to prepping to let me go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to my therapist, and she's just like, "You're so busy trying to prove to these people
Mm-hmm.
that you're capable, and you've been doing this stuff with them for all these years, literally
Mm-hmm.
save these people from ruin during COVID. Not even
And they
kidding
know
you."
that, and they
Yeah.
know what you're doing, but and that's a telltale sign right there, the nitpicking. That's when you know you're doing a really good job, because now it's like, I got to find something. If I can just point out something,
Yeah.
even it's like you said, I mean, I've had managers do it too. I'm like, what are you talking about? Well,
Yeah.
this right here. It's like, what? It's,
If any reason not to give you your props, just let me go. That's
hmm
fine. There's no reason necessary, but you're right. Your mom was right.
hmm
Um, you're trying to prove it to them for
hmm
what, or you trying to, yeah, screw like, and that is, I think, the biggest one of the biggest takeaways. Like, you are enough. You're not this job.
hmm
You can go out and find another job, right?
hmm
I love that. So, any other like final words, takeaways? Because I mean, what you've experienced, I mean, I love listening to your stories because I
Thank
think
you.
people love stories. I love a good story. I love to tell a story.
Yeah.
Um, and so many times I think people just don't get it, but that's the whole point of the podcast because we get
hmm
it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I've had other friends of mine say, "God, I've not had a coffee no cream moment." It's just like, how is that even possible?
hmm
How is that even possible?
hmm
Um, but it's similar to what you said earlier about people sometimes when they haven't had the exposure, or sometimes
hmm
they don't know what to look for or
hmm
whatever. Not to say that you should be always looking for something. That's not the
Right.
point of this either, because that's unhealthy too, right? Like,
Right.
if you're that type of person where stuff can just wash off your back and you don't notice it
Yeah.
and you just go through life and everything's good for you, then that's fine. And there are people like that, and maybe they
Right.
haven't had
Right.
these experiences. So, what is your final takeaway that you would want to give like a younger Tracy who is just getting started, and if you were the person talking to her, the things that you would give her in order to help her navigate these environments, these microaggressions, this mess, this BS, these people, all the things.
I would say, first of all, don't allow people to speak over you. Don't allow toxic people to speak over you. And always, and understand what the difference is between constructive criticism and just criticism. Constructive criticism is always going to come with, here's what you're doing well. This is what you can do to improve. But being able to spot that, and also having a healthy sense of self and knowing your worth, that expression, and I've found it even more true just navigating this corporate space. People truly see your worth before you do. And I think it's unfortunate that a lot of times we miss that. When
Yeah.
someone's picking at you like that, that's when they're like, this person has potential. Even if you are new on the job and you're working with people who've been there for years, just know if they're starting to do these kinds of things to try to make you don't feel good about yourself when you're talking to that person, you leave their presence, clock it immediately. Don't Google and try to figure out when somebody says this happens or whatever. Just know right off the bat, oh, okay, they feel threatened because they see how great I am. They see my potential. They see my worth. I think that is the most important thing, is understanding that you have the right to be in those spaces because you are capable. And that's the key is we get there and, some of us, you have that confidence, but then it's easily shot down when you
Yeah.
are surrounded by people who try to make you feel less than. And you just have to remember, I already know I have my worth and I have a right to be here and I'm capable of being in this space. And I think that's the big thing that I've learned over the years is just knowing like they see that potential, but and I think we know that, but it's like we come into these spaces sometimes just expecting to be accepted, expecting to
Yeah.
be appreciated and liked. And so when we're not, it's an immediate like ego hit, like, oh gosh, I don't think,
Yeah.
and that's okay. Let them, it's as my mom would say, people have their opinions, don't take them away from them, let them keep them, especially if they're
Hmm.
negative. So
Yeah. Don't I love that because I love what you said about when somebody starts picking at you and them seeing your self-worth before you see it, and
mhm.
or seeing your worth before you see it. I love that. That's so true. And also what you said and what I'm getting from it is, you can't take it in. Like
Mhm.
you you can't make it personal because
Right.
it's truly their problem.
Hmm.
It's truly their problem. And I think where I have gone wrong in the past is I have taken it in and I have allowed it to get into my head and mess with my professional self-worth and all of the things. So what you said is really perfect.
Yeah, another mom tip, but this is what she would say to me, and I've gotten to where I've stopped. I'll stop complaining because I'm in a much better place now. So we talk, and she's like, "No stories." I'm like, "There are no stories." But when I was in toxic spaces, she would say, and I'm like, "She said this to me, or they did this, or she took credit for this, or whatever." My dad's very much a person. You handled it, okay, all right, then let it go. But
Right.
she'd say, "Oh," she said, "you opened the lid to that trash can, didn't you? And you just let it all go in there. You let all that garbage go in, and then you closed the lid, didn't you?" So, that's another thing. Just and so I'll go in now and tell myself, keep the lid closed, keep the lid closed. I'm
Right.
not taking any of that toxic trash. So,
I love it. I would have, and I don't know. I would have, I wished I would have, I would have had some of what you're talking about. I know I didn't always have it, and it took me a while to get to the place that I am now. But I mean, I think your parents gave you some great tools, some great tools. So,
yeah, I think they tried their best to equip my brothers and I as we stepped out because they knew.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And also, just because you're from the South, too, I think it's
Yes,
definitely, and my St. Louis is no better. I mean, we are,
right.
especially growing up, but I just think I was so, I don't know, in the clouds, sometimes when we're young, we're so ambitious and idealistic and all of the things, and then it just hits you, like it
Mhm.
smacks you in the face when it happens to you. So you could do all the prep in the world, but when it happens to you, you're just like, whoa, wow, did
Yeah,
that?
that's the thing. So, and I'm like, oh, this is why Dad told us don't, because there have been times
Hmm.
a joke was made or something, and I'm like, what did you just say? And then
Yeah.
it's instead of just kind of being comfortable and not saying anything, because the teaching was there, but it doesn't mean that you won't be caught off guard because you're still just like, wow, I can't believe that.
All I could say is, yeah, it's like until you're in this situation, you never know how you're gonna be. But hopefully, by listening to stories like this and how people who've been there before you have done it, handled it, grown, evolved, and all of the things, it can help somebody else coming along, and even those of us who still need to try to get there. Because I can't say I'm gonna handle every situation perfectly, even till this day, but
Right.
um, we just have to learn, not for them, not for their sake, but for our own sake. I think because it's just so important to our health and our
Yeah.
longevity in this world that we learn how to not allow this stuff, not to keep the lid closed. Let me just say that. Keep that trash lid closed.
I was just gonna say, we're tired, just this year with
Yeah.
everything. We're getting to that place where we're done.
We are tired. We are tired. And again, I don't want to, my whole thing is not to rag on white people,
Hmm.
but to take care of ourselves.
Hmm.
And one of the ways to do that is to get this right in here,
Hmm.
and recognize wholly and completely how like amazing and beautiful we are and what we bring to the table. And if you don't want to be a part of it, that's fine. But
Right.
we're over here doing our own thing and we're just taking care of ourselves. So I think, and as nurturers, just what we've evolved to be, Black women, so wanting to take care of everything and be relied on and depended upon.
Mhm.
I don't even know where that came from, like, with me, because
It's
I
in our
think about it. Hmm?
it's in our nature because I've gotten
Oh
to where
yeah.
I'll self because it's just an automatic. Like I was in a yoga class and somebody knocked their drink over, and I immediately just went to grab some towels, and there was another guy that came and helped.
Yeah.
But and I caught myself and I'm like, why am I like this?
I know, like I don't need to help. I do that. I've done it so much in the past. Like let me overextend. And and I think there's something to do with being a Black woman
Mm-hmm,
where we have this perfectionist syndrome thing
mm-hmm,
that we do, and we just really need to show people how worthy we are. But yeah, it's a muscle that we're gonna have to learn to exercise out of that
mm-hmm,
and
yeah,
start really taking care of ourselves, because
yeah,
it's just to be that way is not serving us.
mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, Tracy, thank you so much for being here. I mean, I've loved having you. I'm so excited that you decided to come on. You agreed. Because when
Yeah.
I saw those videos, I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, your page as well. I was like, ooh, this is good. I love
Hmm.
that. I did a live with somebody last week, and she had made that comment. She said, I feel like we're talking about it, but it's been in whispers,
Yeah.
and it needs to
Yeah.
be loud. Oh, yeah, it does.
It does. And, I still have a very viable business of my own. So I haven't put it on LinkedIn, but it's out there. So
Yeah.
it is what it is. I can't worry about it. And it is what it is. But tell everybody where they can find you, because you guys definitely need to check her out, because she talks the talk. She tells it. She tells the story. So where can everyone find you?
So I'm on TikTok. The handle there is Thinking Out Loud. The handle, excuse me, it's at Marshall Sweat, and Sweat is spelled Sweat. And but if you type in Thinking Out Loud, I should pop up. So yeah.
Okay. And I'll put
Uh,
that on the screen, and I'll link to it in the notes below. So, well,
yeah.
again, you guys, thank you guys for joining us today. Thank you so much, Tracy, for being here, and we will see you guys in the next one.
Right. Thank you.